Swifter, you're on notice because we're going to learn how to create local notifications just like this one. These notifications will work when the app is in the foreground, when it's in the background, or when the app isn't even running. We're going to learn how to get permissions from the user to send them notifications. We're going to learn how to create notification content, how to create notification triggers, how to create and schedule a notification request. Set your appointment for awesomeness. It's time to get it done. Giddy up. iOS offers several different kinds of notifications. There are local notifications that are generated and kept on the iOS device, and they're often used for things like timers and calendars. And then there are remote, or sometimes called push notifications, and these are generated or stored on a separate server. So think about a social network where you want to get a message when somebody likes your post. Now, a social network can't use local notifications. It has to use push notifications because the data that triggers that notification isn't on your device. Push notifications can also be useful because they can send notifications to all of your registered devices, and Apple supports push notifications, and there are a bunch of third-party tools like Google Firebase that also support varieties of push. Now, in this tutorial, we're going to focus on local notifications, and iOS has different kinds of local notifications, including calendars that go off when a particular date and time has occurred, timers that go off after a period of time, and location-based notifications where you can create a geofence that's triggered when the user exits or enters a particular region. We're going to be working with calendar notifications, so we're going to add them to our To-Do app to notify the user when a set reminder has occurred. Now, before we begin, it's a good idea to get into the habit of handling any of the setup stuff that's easy to forget. So we're going to work with AppDelegate.swift first, and you'll perform these steps just about every time you write an app with local notifications. So we're going to go into the rarely used AppDelegate.swift file. We're going to import the user notifications framework. We'll set a delegate in the first function did_finish_launch with options, and that'll allow the notification center to send messages that trigger functions in our app. And then finally, this is an easy one to forget. If we want our app to show notifications when it's open, and we almost always do, we need to add a user notification center function will present with completion handler. And we'll do it like this. We put a couple of extra things in this function, but for the most part, the function will be the same from app to app. So we'll get into AppDelegate.swift. And right at the top, we're going to go ahead and import the user notifications framework with import user notifications. Then inside of this did finish launching with options, we're going to get rid of the comment that we have in here, and we're going to set the delegate, and we'll do this by saying UN user notification center dot current, which gets the current user notification center on this device, and we'll set its delegate to self. Now, this is going to give us an error in just a bit because we need to adopt a protocol, but essentially what this is going to do, it's going to give the notification center on the device the right to be able to send messages that are intercepted and received by our app so that we can respond to them. Now let's add an extension. Down here we'll say extension, AppDelegate, and we're going to adopt the protocol UN User Notification Center delegate. That'll make that error go away. And the extension is going to include one user notification center function. It's the will present function. So if you just type will present, you should see it show up in code completion. It says down here, asks the delegate how to handle a notification that arrived while the app was running in the foreground. So this is important because if you don't do this, if you get a notification while the app has to be open, let's say a reminder while you're setting other reminders, if you don't have this, that notification won't show up. So we'll press enter here. Xcode writes the stub, and inside we'll write a little bit of code. Technically, the 2 lines that we're about to write aren't necessary, but they're useful when you're writing notifications and when you're learning about notifications for the first time. They'll just give you a heads up when a notification has been received and it's about to be displayed inside of our running app. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say let ID equals, and each notification has a unique ID, so we're going to go ahead and get that now. We'll say equal, and then notification is one of the values being passed into this function, and .request.identifier will give us the notification's unique ID. On the next line, I'm going to say print, and then received in-app notification with ID equals string interp ID. It will just show this unique identifier, which isn't going to mean much, but again, if you need to debug, it's useful to have. Otherwise, you can ignore it, and you can delete these 2 lines later. Then underneath, I'm going to say UN user notification center dot current, so that accesses the current notification center. And I'm going to say dot remove all delivered notifications, open and close parens. And the reason I'm going to do that is once I've delivered the notification, I don't want them lingering around and cluttering up my notifications queue. Now there's this piece at the end of the function definition that says completion handler, and the syntax is a little bit unfamiliar. We're going to be covering escaping completion handlers later on, but essentially look at this part that says UN notification presentation options. Now we're going to pass some values between brackets and separated by commas array style, and the values inside will represent the different kinds of notifications that our app will offer. So we're going to offer .alert and .sound. We're not going to use .badge because we're already in the app. The notification will have presented, so there's no reason to show a badge on the icon outside of the app. So now we'll type in completion handler, open parentheses, open bracket for our array of options, .alert, .sound, close bracket, close parens. And again, this might look unusual, but these last two lines you're going to use probably just about every time you use local notifications. So keep these in the way they are. We should be good to go. So now in the next step, which is most of the stuff that's custom to this app, we're going to do in to-do list viewcontroller.swift. And the first thing we need to do at the top of the class is to import user notifications so that we can bring in that new framework. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to explicitly get the user's authorization so that we can send them notifications. So we're going to use this line here that refers to the currently active user notification center. Then we'll call request authorization, which is asking permission. And for options, we pass in an array of the things that we'd like to use in our notification. In our case, we'll set up alerts, sounds, and badges. So let's do this. So here we are in to-do list viewcontroller.swift. And first thing we're going to do is import our user notifications framework. And now let's write a function to request authorization so that we can send the user notifications. So I'm going to create a new function down here right underneath view.load. And let's call this function authorize local notifications. Open and close parentheses. We're not going to pass anything in. Open and close curlies. And then the next line will say UN user notification center. And look what code completion says. The central object for managing notification related activities for your app or app extension. Then you say .lowercase current afterward. It says something very similar. It says returns the shared user notification center object for your app or app extension. Those two pieces just go together. So remember that. It's got open and close curlies afterward. Then press dot. Then you can start to type request authorization. That's the method we're going to use, this one right here with the options. And it says requests authorization to interact with the user when local and remote notifications are delivered to the user's device. Excellent. Press return. Then we're going to put in another array with the different types of notifications that our app will support. So since this is an array, in between square brackets, so we'll put in .alert, .sound, and .badge. There's .carplay in there too. You can explore those later, but alert, sound, and badge are a good place to start. Then I'll double-click the completion handler to give us this trailing closure completion handler syntax. This just reformats in a different syntax, but it's a more popular syntax called trailing closures. The last parameter in this method is a closure. It's essentially a block of code, and we have to operate on that block of code after the method gives us one of two inputs, either a Boolean value or an optionally wrapped error. And then after in, what we do is we put in our code, and we respond to what we should do if it's a bool and what we should do if it's an error. First, let's name the bool. Why don't we call that granted, meaning true or false, that authorization has been granted. And for the error, we'll just call that error. So first, let's deal with the error. And we want to deal with the error if the error is not nil. So we'll use a guard statement. We'll say guard error equals nil, else. So our guard is sort of like a cop at the beginning of this function. And it's saying, okay, I'm going to guard and make sure the only things that pass here are if the error equals nil, meaning there's no error. The else is what we've got to do if there's an error. So think about this as being the bouncers kicking you out of the club. And in these curlies, we've always got to get out of the function. We'll put a print statement to acknowledge the error as well. So I'll type return first. That'll just silence the error for the guard statement not having a return. And then I'll enter print and in quotes, how about angry emoji, error, colon, and then I'll do string interp, error dot localized description. Swift puts in a question mark after the error acknowledging it's optional, but I'm going to force unwrap it with an exclamation point after error because I know if I got here, error is not equal to nil. All right, this statement will kick us out if the error is an error. But if we don't have an error, then let's go ahead and deal with things. Granted is a bool. Let's put in an if statement. If granted, open and close curlies, that's what we'll do if it's true. Else, open and close curlies, that's what we'll do if it's false. For now, let's just put in print statements to make sure this is working okay. So we'll say print, and in quotes, how about checkmark emoji, notification authorization granted, and if granted is not true, how about print denied emoji, the user has denied notifications. And now it's time for a little Xcode grooviness. Since I want to come back here and add an alert later on, I'm going to put in a special comment, a to-do comment. And I do that by saying / to do, colon, and then my comment will be, put an alert in here telling the user what to do. Now watch what happens if I go up here to the jump bar. In the jump bar, you can see the class name, all of the properties, all of the methods, and there's one little indentation in here, which is a to-do item. Comments that start / capital to-do will put a to-do item in the jump bar, making it really easy to go back and figure out what you need to do before you ship your app. Nice. Now, before we build and run, we've got to call authorize local notifications. Let's go ahead and do that in view.load for now. So we'll say authorize local notifications, then we'll build and run. I'll go through this pretty quickly to show you the different options. So the first thing that happens when we hit view did load is we call authorize local notifications. And then we don't see anything's printed out yet. This is what iOS will display to us as part of this request authorizations. Now, we're passing in the options in here. So let me just move this to the side so that you can see. Alert, sound, and badge. So notice what this says up here. To-do list would like to send you notifications. Notifications may include alerts, sounds, and icon badges. Those are the little numbers next to the icons. These can be configured in settings. So you can go and turn them off in settings if you would like to as well. We can either allow or don't allow. That's going to be our granted option. If for some reason there was a crazy error that was in here, the error would strike. But we'll click on allow and look what happens. We get down here, I'll move this over again. Notifications authorization granted. Perfect. Hey, I wonder what would happen the next time we run this app. So I'm going to actually quit out of the simulator so that you can see. I'm going to build and run again. The app starts up, view did load hits, and it caches what the user's preference was. Notification authorization granted. Nice. Now let's see what would happen if we shut off notifications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Shift Command H. That's the command in the simulator to get you to the home screen. I'm going to swipe over to the left. I'm going to open up the Settings app. And if I scroll down here, I can actually see that there are settings for my app to-do list. Click on that. You can see that there's a notification setting option. Allow notifications. I'm going to check that off. Then I'm going to quit out of my simulator. I'm going to rerun my app. And what do you think we're going to see? Well, here's the app running, and whoa, it says the user has denied notifications. These are exactly the results we wanted. We'll eventually put an alert in here that warns the users that they won't be able to get alerts for any reminders that they set, but we'll worry about that later. For now, let's go ahead and get our first notification working. Now let's do the first two steps for setting up a notification. We've got to create content for the notification, and we've got to set a trigger for when the notification goes off. In terms of content, there's actually a special data type for that content. It's called a UN for user notification, mutable notification content object. It's not a very easy thing to remember, but the nice thing is, once you've got this code written, you'll be able to reuse it with just a small amount of modification. So we're going to call our object of this type content, and we're going to refer to these properties inside of it. We'll give it a title for the top. We'll use the name of our to-do item. A subtitle, we're not going to give it any, but just so that you can see where the subtitle shows up, I'll put in quotes here, I don't have any. The body will be the to-do item notes. Now, in terms of what you'd customize, if you wanted to redo this in another app, just the things that are underlined in green. So you'll pass in a different value for the title, subtitle, and body. You might want to use a different sound, and if you do, what you've got to do is you've got to set up a special data type that's a UN notification sound name, and use that to create a special UN notification sound. Now, there are a couple of tricky things about this. One is you can't use sounds in a standard MP3 format. They've got to be in a format of AIFF, WAV, or CAF. They've got to be less than 30 seconds. If not, your app will play the default sound. And you can't store these in the assets catalog like we did with our other sounds. In the example I'm showing you up here, I dragged my WAV file into my project just alongside my Swift files. This will work. You can try it out on your own, but for now, we're just going to go with the default sound. It's quite pleasant. So we're going to write a function to set a calendar notification. So why don't we write that right underneath authorize local notifications. We'll call that func set calendar notification. We'll just do one at a time. And we'll write this function so that we can pass in all of the parameters that potentially somebody might want to use, even though we're not going to use all of them right now. We'll do open parentheses, and what we're going to pass in is title colon string, comma subtitle colon string, comma body colon string, comma badge number colon, and these are a little weird. This takes an NS number. We'll put it in as an optional now. So we'll put question mark after NS number, and we'll ignore this, but we'll leave it in here in case we want to change that at some future date. Then we'll say comma sound colon, and that's a UN notification sound. We'll also put that in as an optional, comma date colon date. And then after the parentheses, I'm going to do a return arrow, string, open and close curlies. Now this value that I'm going to return, it's going to be a unique identifier for each notification. You'll be able to consider it almost like the social security number of notifications. So we can tell one apart from another and we can identify them if we need to. We're actually going to create this unique value. I'll show you how we can do that. And we'll also modify our to-do item struct so that we're saving the unique identifier for any notification inside the to-do item. Now, where should we call setting up our notifications? Well, why don't we do it in save data? That's a good place for it because we call save data whenever we've either modified a to-do item or added a new to-do item. And the place where we make any changes to our to-do items should also be the place where we make changes to any notifications too. But first, what we're going to do is we're just going to set up a notification for the very first item in our to-do items list. And we're going to do this just to prove that we can set up a notification. Once we do that, then we'll set them up for all of our to-do items. So what we'll do here is we'll get that first to-do item. We'll say let to do item equals to do items dot first. Now notice what this dot first does. It returns the first element in the array. The array could be empty, which is why there's a question mark here. It could return nil, but we will only do this when we have an item inside of our to-do items. So we'll press enter on this. We'll go ahead and force unwrap with an exclamation point. And again, this is just a test. We'll go back and change this line later on. Now let's go ahead and call that function we're about to write. So we'll say let, and remember, it's going to return that special social security number for notifications. We'll call that notification ID equals, and as we start to type in set calendar notification, yep, Xcode knows about this function because we just wrote the definition for it, so press return, and then we can tab through and put in all of the parameters. So for title, it's going to be to-do item.name. Subtitle, let's just put in a string literal here that says capital subtitle would go here. For body, that will be to-do item.notes. Badge number nil. Sound, we'll put in dot default. Notice when we type in dot, since this is a UN notification sound, and that's how we defined our function, it knows that there's a default sound, so it makes that suggestion. Press return, and our date is just going to be to-do item.date. And now let's scroll back to set calendar notifications and fill out the body of this function. First, let's put in a comment that says create content, and then underneath we'll put in the different content items. So we'll say let content equal, and remember what this is. It's a UN immutable notification content object. Open and close parentheses, that will create an empty one, but then we'll go ahead and we'll populate it. We'll say content.title equals title, content.subtitle equals subtitle, content.body equals body, content.sound equals sound, content.badge equals badge number. We're actually not going to do anything with this right now, but we've got this in here as a placeholder, so if we want to change it at some point in the future, we can. And so after we create the content, we create the trigger, which is when is this notification going to go off. We'll put in a comment that says create trigger. Now to set up a calendar notification trigger, we need to pass in date components. Now date components are a special format, but fortunately iOS has a way for us to very easily take a date and break it down into its component parts. And so this is how we do that. First, we'll create a variable to hold the date component. So we'll say var date components equals, and then this is how we get at that method to be able to break up the date into components. We say capital calendar dot current dot date components, that's the method, open parentheses, and the date components go in between square brackets, array style. So we're going to put in dot year, comma, dot month, comma, dot day, comma, dot hour, comma, dot minute, and that's going to be from date, which is the date for this to-do item that we're passing into this function. So that's lowercase date. And on this next line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say date components dot second equals 00. And the reason why I'll do that is as soon as the second turns over, I'll have the event fire. It'll just make our testing a little bit faster. Now we're ready to create that trigger. So we'll say let trigger, that's what we'll call it, equals UN calendar notification trigger. Make sure that you select this one that says date matching with the date components. Pass in date components, that variable we just created, and repeats should be false. Now we're ready to create our request. So remember I said that we need to create a unique notification ID, sort of like a social security number. Well, this is how we do it. We say UUID, open and close parens, dot UUID string. What's UUID? Well, UUID is a term you'll hear in computing that stands for Universally Unique Identifier. And in fact, when we use this, we will get back a unique string, which is guaranteed to be non-repeatable. There will never be that use of that string ever in the universe. Nice. Once we have that, we set up our notification request. We'll call it request. We'll say let request equals UN notification request, and inside the parameters we'll pass in for the identifier will be notification identifier. For the content will be the content we just created, and the trigger will be the trigger we just created. Once we do that, we're ready to schedule the request. The way that we do that is we call UN notification center dot current, and then we use the dot add method. We pass in our request. We process the error. If there is an error, hopefully there will not be an error, and we'll be good to go. We can watch the magic of the notification happen. Let's do it. We'll put in a comment to say that we're creating a request. Then we need to set up that unique notification ID. Remember the social security number? We'll say let notification ID equals. And the way we create that is by saying capital UUID, open and close parenthesis, dot UUID. Notice what code completion says. Returns a string created from UUID, such as, and there's a long crazy alphanumeric format, but if you ever see this, you know you're looking at a unique identifier. Press return and accept this. Now let's create the request. Let request equal UN notification request. Look what code completion says. A request to schedule a local notification, which includes the content of the notification and the trigger conditions for delivery. This is what we want. Press return. Open parens. Be sure to choose this one with the identifier content and trigger. press return, and for our identifier, it's notification ID. For our content, it's content, and for our trigger, it is trigger. I'm going to scroll up and give myself some more room and put in a comment that says register a request with the notification center. The way we do this is we say UN notification center dot current dot add, and it wants a request. We just put in the request. For completion handler, let's double click on this area so that we get the trailing closure style. For error, let's put in lowercase error. Let's deal with that error. So the error comes in as an optional. We'll say if let error equals error, which means it's not nil. If it's not nil, then we'll print a warning to the user. We'll say print error, string interpolation, error.localized description. Yikes, adding notification request went wrong. Put in an angry emoji. Otherwise, if everything is okay in the else condition in between the curlies, we'll say print notification scheduled, string interpolation. We'll print out the notification ID. And how about comma title, string interpolation, content.title, so we can see what the title was. We've got to return the notification ID that we just created. So we will say just before the last curly in this function, return notification ID. Looking good. Now let us build and run and see how this is looking. But I still have my user has denied notification, so this is what I'm going to do. Now here's another pro tip. I'm going to go back to the home screen with the Shift Command H, and I'm going to delete the application. And so here's my to-do list. I'll just long press on top of it. I'll delete app, delete. Pay no mind to these extra apps, 8-ball and wand. I was running an iOS workshop at the Boston College Hackathon yesterday, so that's what those are. You can ignore them. Build and run again. So by deleting the app from the simulator, this gets rid of all previous user selections and preferences. We start fresh as if it was a brand new app install. That you have not indicated whether or not you want to authorize notifications, so it presents you with the message. Would you like to allow notifications? Allow. We can see notifications were granted in our print console. Excellent. We'll click on plus. This will be our first great notification! Exclamation point! Reminder set. I want to set it today. It is currently 9:30. Let's set it to 9:31 and see what happens. Click on save. Whoa, there it is! How fantastic. There's our first notification. There is a subtitle that would go here if we had a subtitle. Nice. Let's go ahead and set up another one. Let's do this for 32. We didn't have any notes here. Let's add some. These are extensive notes! Exclamation point. Save. Hey, what would happen if we weren't in this app? I'll do Shift Command H to go back to the home screen, and let's see what would happen. 9:32 rolls around and glorious! Our first great notification subtitle would go here, and these are our extensive notes. Cool! Let's swipe down from the top and see what's there. Our notification. What happens if we swipe right? We can open the app. What happens if we swipe left? We can manage, we can view, and we can clear. Let's swipe right, click open to open that app. All right, let's set up another one. What would happen if we were on the lock screen? Let's see, we'll go to 9:33. Save. How do we get to the lock screen? Well, first, let's imagine that we're out of the app with a Command H. Let's do a Command L for lock screen. My iPhone is locked. What will happen at 9:33? And oh, skunk, I totally forgot to unpause, so let's go back and do this again. I didn't record the video that I thought I did. So we'll click on this great notification. Let's see, it's 9:56 now. What if we do it at 9:57? We'll save. We'll go to the home screen. We'll go to the lock screen. And we'll wait ever so patiently. Boom shakalaka. Nifty notifications. Look at this greatness. We can swipe right. Our app opens up right where I want to be. Outstanding. You know what? I think we're ready to put notifications in for all of our to-do items. Let's do it. So back in our code, just above set calendar notification, I'm going to create a new function, func set notifications, plural. We won't pass in any parameters, open and close curlies. And let's go ahead and call this from save data. And what we'll do is whenever we save data, meaning whenever we've changed, we've deleted, we've added a new to-do item, we'll delete all of our notifications and we'll recreate them. This way, if any of those data changes impact our notifications, we're going to set up brand new notifications nice and fresh. Now, you might think that that's not very efficient, but it's really easy for us to code. We're not going to have that many notifications in our app, so we'll do it this way. Now, since we're going to be setting up new notifications, we can actually delete the last two lines in our save data function. They were used just to prove that we could post one notification. And then we'll call our new save notifications function right here. Now let's code up that bad boy. So in set notifications, the first thing we're going to do is we don't want to run set notifications if there are no items in our to-do items list. So we're going to say guard to-do items.count greater than 0, else, if that's not the case, the bouncer will tell you to return. Otherwise, the bouncer lets you through. Then we want to remove all notifications. How do we do that? We type in UN user notification center .current and there's a method remove all pending notification requests. And now let's recreate them with the updated data that we just saved. So we're going to go through all of our notifications. We'll say for index in 0 ... less than to-do items.count. Open curlies. By the way, the reason we're using indexes in here instead of iterating through arrays is we're going to need to update array elements. And if we iterated through an array, if we said to-do item, for example, in to-do items, we wouldn't be able to modify the to-do item because it would be a constant. But by using the index, we can refer to the index to get the specific element, and we can update that because it's a variable. So as we go through all of the elements in to-do items, we want to check to see if there is a reminder set. If to-do items bracket index, close bracket, dot reminder set. Reminder set is a Boolean. If it's true, inside the curlies, what we'll do is we will update the notification ID for our to-do item. But wait, why isn't it showing up in code completion when we say to-do item index.notification ID? Because we haven't created that property yet. So let's go over to the struct where we defined to-do item and add a notification ID. Some to-do items will have a notification ID, some won't. So we'll say var notification ID colon string question mark. Because this is an optional, we're not going to have to change all of our initializers when we call to create a new item. Remember we did that when we added the new property reminder set? We had to update wherever we created a new to-do item. Well, we don't have to do that here because nil is an option. If we don't pass in a value for this property, it'll be considered nil. All right, let's go back then to to-do list view controller.swift. I'll backspace over what I had there. I'll do a quick shift command K to rebuild and make sure that Xcode knows about the new notification ID. And after to-do items index, I'll say .no, and look, notification ID shows up. Excellent. Press return because this is what we want to update when we return from our function. Which function? We're going to say equals. Then set calendar notification, that magnificent function we just wrote. And we're going to pass in our to-do items elements for this index. But you know what? Instead of having to type to-do items index for each one, let's just go up here and we'll create a constant that we'll use just for this call. It'll make the call just a little bit smaller so that we don't have to repeat index. So we'll say let to-do item equals to-do items open and close bracket, index. And now down in our function, we can say title is to-do item.name, subtitle equals empty string, body equals to-do item.notes, badge number equals nil, sound equals .default, and date equals to-do item.date. Now let's build and run and see if we have nifty numerous notifications. I'll set 3 of these. First, let me go ahead and set this one for 10:44, and then we'll do a second one. We'll set that for 10:45, and we'll do the third Meister, and we'll set this one for 10:46. I'm gonna get out of here, and let's see how things go in a few minutes. All right, we have our first notification in here. Looking good. Let's see what happens if we're back on the home screen. Shift Command H. No, nice! We've got a second one! What happens if we're back on the lock screen? And the answer is, oh no, you'd have to wait for 24 hours. Swifter, you probably caught this. I'd set this up for Monday instead of today. Let's go ahead and see if we can go back to the home screen for, oh, too late for 48. Let's do it for 49. Save. Home screen. Lock screen. 3 in a row, that is notification nirvana. Swifters, you have done wonderfully. So our app is looking good. There still are a few edge cases that we need to deal with in order to make our app work perfectly. For example, if the user set notifications and then turned them off and then turned them back on and got back in, we'll try to address those in a future video. But for now, you know how to set up notifications, you know how they work, and you've done it. Things are looking slick. Feel good about your skills, Swifter, and keep at it.